As I understand it, there needs to be support, there needs to be funding for a number of these labs to open up. That hasn't happened yet. What do you know of a solution to get this ramped up immediately?
We've got to make sure the dots are connected, Judy. When the Congress, with a great deal of generosity, gave billions of dollars to try and solve this problem, they gave something like $10 billion to the CDC to give to the states to do these kinds of implementing. We've got to make sure that it gets well spent and that it gets done in the right way. Again, we have a problem. We need to admit it and own it, but we've got to do the things that are very clear that we need to do to turn this around. Remembering we can do it. We know that when you do it properly, you bring down those cases. We've done it. We've done it in New York. New York got hit worse than any place in the world. And they did it correctly by doing the things that you're talking about.
Hi, I'm John Cullen. Welcome to another episode of Just the Facts. In this episode, we're going to take a look at the map from Johns Hopkins. We're going to take a look at some of the data from the CDC. We're going to go directly to their website. And in this episode, I'm going to show you how I do a lot of the charting that I do. But many of you are familiar with some of the charts that I generate, and we're going to go to the CDC's website and get the data, and I'm going to show you how I make these charts in this episode. So we're going to look at some of these dashboards that I use. Harvard University calls these balanced scorecards. And I'm going to explain how I put these together, and I'm going to show you how I do this using the CDC's data. So that's what we're going to do in this episode. But the focus of the episode is on the children. And so in this episode, I wanted to look at reopening the schools in the United States. It seems that there's a lot of activity in the news regarding reopening the schools. What we're going to take a look at here is a clip from MSNBC. So again, all of the chatter, all the news that I'm seeing has to do with reopening the schools. The CDC said in-person schools may reopen with precautions, as data shows scant virus spread. And I don't know if many of you are aware of this, but there's a new head of the CDC in the United States. And the head of the CDC in the United States now is this young lady. Rochelle Walensky, Dr. Rochelle Walensky. I'm going to play a clip of Dr. Rochelle Walensky talking with Rachel Maddow. And this was filmed and published within the last 48 hours. It was published here by Ian Hanchett on February the 3rd, 2021. So let's listen to Dr. Rachel Walensky on the Rachel Maddow Show. And then when we come back, we're going to talk more about opening the schools and what it's going to cost to do it, the size of the project, how big an undertaking that is. Just the facts. I'm John Cullen. Let's take a listen to Dr. Walensky.
Joining us once again is Dr. Rochelle Walensky, the new director of the CDC. Dr. Walensky, thank you again for being here. It is a real honor to have you. Those comments today at the COVID briefing from the White House caused a lot of consternation, got a lot of attention. I think Broadly speaking, I am not a teacher, but I know a lot of teachers, and I feel like teachers are worried that even if kids aren't necessarily at high risk, if they get infected at school, many of the teachers feel like they are at high risk. Why isn't it a prerequisite for safe reopening for teachers to get the vaccine?
Thank you for raising this, and thank you for discussing it. I want to be very clear about what the science shows and what I believe in how we should prioritize. There's accumulating data that suggests that there is not a lot of transmission and that is happening in schools when the proper mitigation measures are taken. When there is masking, when there is distancing, de-densification of the classroom, ventilation, contact tracing, hand washing, all of those things, when they're done well, the data suggests, the science suggests that there is not a lot of transmission happening in schools. And in fact, the case rates in schools are generally lower than they are in the population surrounding it. So that's what the data and the science suggest. And that we definitely want to have the community rates of disease go down. We want to make sure that that is happening as well. But the data suggests that it's safe to go back to school if you do all of those mitigation measures. Now, that said, the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices has prioritized teachers as essential personnel because they are essential to our society's function. And so they fall in the 1B category, and they should be prioritized as essential workers for vaccination. That can be true, and I can believe that to be true, and I can emphasize that I believe teachers should get vaccinated. But I also think that the science tells us that if we can do the proper mitigation measures, and I would emphasize if we have the funding to do the proper mitigation measures as is put forth in the American Rescue Plan, that we can reopen schools safely, even if all of the teachers are not vaccinated.
Is CDC going to do detailed guidance that will, if it's seen as authoritative guidance, that will be seen as effectively rules for what it takes to safely reopen schools?
They are working actively on that now, and it should be forthcoming. Absolutely, because we know that guidance is essential.
Now, I have to ask you on that point, though. We have had a political promise, a campaign promise from President Biden that one of his goals for his first 100 days is that he wants schools to reopen. So, I mean, maybe I'm once bitten, twice shy here, given what's happened with the Trump administration in the past year. But is it reasonable to be suspicious of CDC guidance on reopening schools, given that the president has said that schools should reopen? If CDC scientists find that scientifically, actually, it's hard to safely reopen schools, maybe we shouldn't be doing so much in-person learning, will the Biden administration, will the president let you say that publicly?
I think all of what you're saying is actually consistent. The Biden administration, and I agree with it, believes that schools should be the last thing to close and the first thing to open. That administration, and I agree with it, believes that there should be adequate funding to make sure that all of the mitigation measures are in place in schools, should be prioritized in schools so that we can get those schools open. And then there should be funding for testing in schools. There should be funding and resources for vaccination of teachers. So all of those things are consistent. And I think what that first 100-day plan tells us is this is a priority. We have to get our children back to school.
In terms of some of the most vulnerable people and the people who have experienced the highest rates of infection, particularly on the job, we reported here last year that your predecessor, Dr. Robert Redfield, sorry to say it this way, but he tampered with a report on COVID transmission at a meatpacking plant. He ordered CDC investigators to water down their findings and recommendations. Thereafter, after we reported that, we learned that the meatpacking industry had effectively drafted the president's executive order mandating that meatpacking plants must stay open even if local or state health authorities wanted to shut them down for public health reasons. That to me is a disaster, especially given how many thousands of people who work in the meatpacking industry ended up getting infected and how many of them died. Are you going to unwind all of that? Should we expect a revision of that? It seems like that process was so corrupted.
We intend to do a full review of all the guidance to ensure that it fully follows the science. It has been reviewed by subject matter experts. What I can tell you is we are stewards of public health. We want to make sure that those workers in the meatpacking plants are safe. We want to make sure that the food is safe for the American people. The Department of Labor has put forward guidance to make sure that those workers are safe. They are guidance that should look at infection control policies within those meatpacking plants to make sure that all of the documents and guidance for the workers are actually in multiple languages so that they can fully understand them. And yes, we intend to fully make sure that the science is leading this.
Dr. Rochelle Walensky, the new director of the Centers for Disease Control. Ma'am, I'll just say right now, thank you for what you're doing. And I will reiterate how intimidated I am by the task ahead of you. But I'll also tell you, if you get stepped on and if you and the scientists at CDC for any reason feel like you are not able to lead with public health or you're not able to say what you think needs to be done, if you get into some politically uncomfortable positions with the new administration, which I don't expect, but if it happens, please know that you've got an open door here to tell the public what's going on. And you will not believe how much support you will get for scientific freedom if there's any political trammel on what you're doing.
I look forward to being back, and I sure hope and don't anticipate that it will be for that reason.
I am with you on that. I look forward to having you back. Good luck to you. Thank you so much. All right, we'll be right back.
Thank you.
So that was Dr. Rochelle Walensky on Rachel Maddow's show. So she has taken over for Dr. Redfield. She's the new head of the CDC. So she's the new Dr. Redfield. I wanted to talk now about what it's going to take to reopen the schools. One of the representatives, Democratic Representative Hayes, I believe she's from Connecticut, has said that, yes, Johanna Hayes, a Democrat from Connecticut, has said that she thinks there's a lot of things that need to happen before I'm comfortable with reopening the schools. It'll cost about $250 billion. That's a lot of money. In fact, we're going to take a look at how much money that is. Because one of the things that I posted, I don't know, a week or so ago, looked at how much money that is. And it's important that we get perspective on $250 billion is enough money to do what? And then what kind of project is it that is going to cost $250 billion to get these schools ready? So we're going to take a look at that. And that's part of the show. So we're going to look at the data. We're going to look at the charts. We're going to figure out how these charts are made. I'm going to show you how to do that. But I want to talk about $250 billion because it is a lot of money. I posted a meme a week ago that said that the Apple headquarters cost $5 billion. And what that means is we could build one of these in every state for $250 billion. That's a lot of work. That Apple headquarters took a long time to build. That was a massive, massive project. And so what I'm wondering is, how similar is that project to what we're going to need to do to get the schools ready? Because if we just look at the dollars, it's about the same. So putting one of these Apple headquarters in every state in the union is about $250 billion because the Apple headquarters cost $5 billion. Another way to look at it, maybe more fun, because Jeff Bezos is probably going to end up spending a lot of time on his yacht. I would. This is the Flying Fox. Now, to be honest, I wouldn't own this because this to me represents wretched excess. And to think that one person should have this, I mean, that's a little over the top. But it cost about $500 million. And so $500 million is enough money that we could get 10 of these for every state in the union. 10. And that would add up to $250 billion. Jeff Bezos's Flying Fox, the yacht, cost about $500 million to build new. So for $250 billion, every state in the United States could get 10 of these built. And I'm not talking about, that it's a good use of the money. I'm talking about the size of the project. Do you know what an undertaking it is to build one of these yachts, let alone to build 10 of them? So I'm just talking about size and scale of the project. A project that is a $500 million project is a big project. And effectively, what's being proposed is $5 billion per state, assuming, all things being equal. So I wanted to just make a comparison, given that Jeff Bezos just stepped down. So let's take a look at how do we make these charts? How do I do this? Where's this data coming from? And what we're going to do is we're going to go right to the CDC's website. And we're going to take a look at, what is this data telling us? And what can we learn? Are there observations here that we can make from this data that are meaningful? I believe there are meaningful observations. For example, we're going to look at some of the leading causes of death for children. And what we want to see is, where does coronavirus fit in to the leading causes of death of school-age kids? And we're going to take a closer look at that. But before we do, let's do a quick true or false. More children from birth to 14 died in the USA from strokes than coronavirus in 2020. Is that true or false? I'm going to repeat the question. More children age birth to 14 died in the USA from strokes than coronavirus in 2020. Is that true or false? That's true. So in that age group, 0 to 14, there's 121 kids dead as of the last time I checked. And this is what we're going to do in this show, is I'm going to go back to the CDC and check this number and see if it's still 121 or if it's gone up. But the number of kids from 0 to 14 that have died from stroke is 229. Significantly higher. I didn't even know that kids died from strokes. I thought that was something that happened later in life. So to find out that more kids are dying from strokes than from coronavirus, according to the CDC, this is all CDC data, and I'm going to show you how we go and get this, where we go. So yeah, I posted this meme because I thought that this helped to put things into perspective. Here's another one. More children aged 0 to 14 died in the USA from asthma than COVID-19 in 2020. And that's true, too. It seems more children died from asthma in 2020 than coronavirus. According to the CDC, again, we're going to go right there right now, and I'm going to show you how I get this data, and we're going to chart it real time. And what we're going to see is that most of the deaths are coming from people 65 and older. And when we look at the children, and we look at, well, deaths from all causes versus deaths from coronavirus, it seems that we might need more money than the amount of money that's being proposed. Because if we're worried about the kids that are dying, there's other measures we're going to need to take. I'm going to show you how to get to the mapping system that I'm going to show you in a second, but how do you find it? If you go to drudgereport.com and you scroll down in Drudge Report, in the middle column, they have something that says World Sick Map. And if you click on World Sick Map here in Drudge, at the bottom of the middle column, it'll take you to the mapping system that I helped spearhead the development of back in the late 1980s. And this is a system from a company called ESRI, and the name of the system is ArcInfo. And I'll show you a couple pointers, give you a couple tips on how to use the system to sort of show your family and friends some of the more interesting aspects of the mapping system. So if you click on the map anywhere, click and hold your mouse, you can move the map around, so you can scroll to different places. And if you're using a mouse that has a little wheel or a touch surface, you can zoom in and out by just rolling your finger on your mouse. So if you're using a Mac, you know how to do that. And if you have a Windows machine, you can roll your mouse up and down and you can zoom in and out. And by clicking and dragging and zooming in and out, you can go to different parts of the world and see what's happening. All right, so that's how you navigate through the map. And you can zoom in on different parts of the world. And when you do that, down below the map in the lower portion, there are a series of tabs. The map defaults to cumulative cases. And when you zoom out, the size of the red circles shows the cumulative cases. So India has more, it would appear, than China, right? So China doesn't have that many big red circles. And when we go to Europe, there's a fair number of them here compared to Africa. So there doesn't seem to be as many big circles now in Africa. South America, you see it along the coasts, and then the United States compared to Canada. So Canada only has a couple places that are reporting in. When you click on the red circles, it'll give you more information. So if I click on Quebec, up here in the upper left-hand corner, it tells us how many cases there are in Quebec and how many people have died. So about 10,000, just shy of 10,000 people have died in Quebec. If you change the map by clicking one of these tabs down here, active cases, the color of the map changes and the information that's provided is different. So let's zoom in here on Malaysia. Malaysia is at the southern end of the Malay Peninsula. This is the Malay Peninsula. And this portion of the Malay Peninsula, the eastern middle portion, is Thailand. This western section here is Myanmar, not Burma. It used to be called Burma. It's now called Myanmar. Thailand used to be called Siam, but it's not anymore. And this is not called Burma. This is Myanmar. You come down Thailand, and right here is the border to Malaysia. And then from here south is Malaysia. This is Georgetown. And I've been here. I've crossed this border by car. I've driven all the way down through here. I've been down on this coast of Malaysia. And then here's Kuala Lumpur. And if you click on this yellow dot, it will give you different information than if we were using this original tab, which is cumulative cases. So when I have cumulative cases selected and I click on the red dot, it only shows me cases and deaths. But if I change it to active cases and click on the dot, now it gives me more information. So this is what I prefer to use. So I don't use the cumulative cases tab. For me, it's less information. The other thing that I tend not to look at is over on the right-hand side of this mapping system. In the lower right-hand corner, it shows daily cases, and that's a default, meaning that's what it's going to show you. But if you come over here to the right, there is an arrow, and you can change the setting, and that's what I'm going to do. So I'm interested in daily deaths, and this is globally. This is the daily global death count. And up here, it tells us globally we have 2.3 million people that have died. And then country by country, as you click on the country, it will take you to that country, but way too zoomed in. So now you got to zoom out. So this is now showing United States. But down here in the lower right-hand corner, this is still showing global deaths. If I click on United States on the left side of the map, the lower right will change. And if I now go to India, what I'm looking at is I'm clicking on the left side on different countries. I'm looking at this chart on the lower right. And the chart on the lower right is telling me how many people are dying per day in the country. And quite frankly, what you're seeing here, this is great. What this means is India has peaked. It looks like they peaked back in September, and now they are coming down. And what we learned from Rosalind Eggo when she spoke in Thessalonica, Greece, is that this would represent depletion of susceptibles.
Doesn't happen. Well, this is because you start to run out of susceptible people, so people who haven't had the infection. And this is called depletion of susceptibles. So 100 years ago, a new influenza virus emerged, spread around the world, and killed 50 to 100 million people. For every 40 people that got this influenza infection, one of them died. And you think, maybe that's not that bad odds, but for the most recent influenza pandemic, for each person that died, there were probably 10,000 cases, which means that this 1918 influenza pandemic was the worst pandemic in history. Here's a graph showing the weekly deaths at the time of the pandemic in New York, London, Paris, and Berlin. You can quite clearly see in the middle the major wave of the pandemic. And so all the way from North America to Europe, this pandemic was happening at the same time. And this synchronicity, this is a common feature of influenza pandemics. But data were being collected on deaths. And this really shows that infectious diseases are a priority. And we need to collect these kind of data to understand how and why these epidemics happen. So computational and mathematical tools can be used on data like these to understand the transmission processes and how the epidemic is occurring, with the ultimate aim of trying to develop interventions, so control methods, to curtail the epidemic and to slow down transmission. The epidemic will grow. So the reproduction number, the average number of people that each infectious person infects, really determines how quickly the epidemic grows. Okay, well, this is true, especially in the beginning. But if you carried on like this, with each person infecting 2, step by step, as we've shown here, by the 33rd step, you would have infected everybody on Earth. And we know that that doesn't happen. So why is it that that doesn't happen? Well, this is because you start to run out of susceptible people, so people who haven't had the infection. And this is called depletion of susceptibles. So when Spiros tries to infect her, he can't. And that means that the number infected slows down. And if this is true for other people in the population, like this, then you start to see a slowdown in the number of people infected. So this is depletion of susceptibles, and I'll show you how we incorporate these kind of processes into models of transmission. So if we were going to model something like flu, the first thing we would do is divide the population into 3 disease groups. So here you can see people who are susceptible to infection, so they're able to get infected. You can see infectious people who have got the infection and are spreading it to other people. And then you've got in blue the recovered or died group. So normally we assume that when people recover from infection, they're protected. But if it's a very severe infection, they may also have died. So at the beginning of an epidemic, when most people are susceptible, so they haven't had it, the probability that you meet a susceptible person is quite high. But later, as this pool is depleted, so you run out of susceptible people, it becomes less likely that you'll meet a susceptible individual.
Hopefully this goes down to zero and trails away. But that's what we learned from Rosalind Eggo, is that this represents depletion of susceptibles, and that's excellent. So this is India, and it appears that India is on the right path. And in fact, now in India, according to the system, they're at about 95 people dying per day in India. And I believe right now that's fewer than California. We'll double check that in a minute. But India is on the right path right now. That's good news. When we click on Brazil, we see that Brazil now is either in the second node of their outbreak or is at the beginning of something else here, right? So they're now ramping back up. After what appeared to be depletion of susceptibles, now this appears to be a binodal aspect of their outbreak. And remember that in Brazil, back in April, March and April, they were not experiencing a whole lot of deaths. They didn't really get to their peak death until we get to late July of 2020. Then they started to taper down. That's a reporting anomaly here. But it tapers down, and then starts picking back up. So is this a binodal outbreak? Very well could be. We go to the United Kingdom, and again, we see that the second peak is worse than the first. And this is similar to what we saw with the United States. And we were reporting on this in the United States on the show with Jason the other evening, where the second major node here is significantly higher than what the United States was experiencing back in April. And back in April, the previous administration rolled out those field hospitals because they were worried that the hospitals were going to get overrun.
We are in a war against an invisible enemy.
Normally, the BCEC is a busy place in April, but those events were canceled weeks ago. But now that the city and the state is expecting a major surge in April, they're building a 1,000-bed hospital in 4 days.
Eggo is transforming a convention centre into a makeshift healthcare facility over concerns of a surge in infections.
Getting a first look inside the field hospitals here at the Rhode Island Convention Center and the old Citizens Bank location in Cranston.
Eyewitness News reporter Logan Wilbur has more on the 1,000 extra hospital beds being prepared for Rhode Islanders.
As we speak, a mad dash is underway inside the TCF Center to convert it into a field hospital to treat coronavirus patients.
Our first look inside since FEMA and the Army Corps of Engineers got to work building what could end up being a 900-bed facility. Victor Williams got to go inside. Really fascinating and impressive how quickly this is happening, Victor.
We had a lot of rumors about was the military taking over Seattle? The answer is no. They're here to help.
300 soldiers will soon transform the CenturyLink Event Center into a fully functioning hospital with nearly 150 beds, surgeons, even a pharmacy on site.
Well, Miami-Dade County has been and is the hot spot in the state with more cases than any other county. So the new Miami Beach Convention Center is being transformed into a field hospital. CBS 4's Jessica Vallejo is there live with more details. Jessica, good morning.
But this is what it looks like now. The floor filled with beds that could be used for patients if Philly's hospitals get a surge of coronavirus patients.
Essentially, it's a field hospital.
Hospitals in the region are very busy but are not overwhelmed with patients. Beds remain open. Now that means many field hospitals like the one set up at the Leah Core Center have not been called to duty just yet. But as Eyewitness News reporter Dan Koob has found, officials say it's still best to be ready. Dan's on Temple's campus this evening in North Philly. Dan?
Yuki, turning the Leah Core Center into a field hospital was a preemptive move by the city in order to take care of its citizens. Now, 2 days after reopening as a COVID site, the Leah Core Center has yet to see a single patient.
Well, Francis and Elliot, this facility here, this field hospital at the Miami Beach Convention Center, is scheduled to be ready in less than 2 weeks. Now, there are 2 others in Miami-Dade, one in Broward. However, state and local leaders say even though they have these field hospitals, at least right now, they are not needed.
In just 3 weeks, a field hospital will be placed here at the Miami Beach Convention Center.
Once they decide they're going to do it, they very quickly build it, and then they let it sit there and hope that it's not going to be used.
The Miami Beach mayor spoke to NBC6 before the decision was made, but after the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers looked at the facility.
It's from 250 to 2,000 different beds.
The size will be estimated based on the perceived need as officials everywhere continue to respond to this COVID-19 health crisis. The field hospital would be used to treat people who don't have the virus if the hospitals are overrun.
Now from CBS 2 News, this is a special report.
The Maryland National Guard is working on setting up a field hospital at the Baltimore Convention Center. There will be 250 beds to treat coronavirus patients. The University of Maryland Medical System and Johns Hopkins Medicine are jointly running the site.
Now, the Maryland National Guard also set up tents for treatment at MedStar Union Memorial and MedStar Good Samaritan hospitals, just in case there is an overflow of COVID-19 patients. Now, General Janine Burkhead tells us they're treating this pandemic similar to a
As we speak, preparations are being made at the Memorial Convention Center to convert it into a giant field hospital if it's needed for anticipated overflow of coronavirus patients. Mike Perlstein reports.
Yes, I'm here at the Ernest N. Morial Convention Center, where the plan is to turn this into a giant field hospital. Now, they're planning for the worst case scenario, but obviously hoping for the best case, where it is of limited use or hopefully no use at all.
Now more on several field hospitals going up in our area to deal with the outbreak. Some of the locations include Atlantic City, Delaware County, and North Philadelphia.
In just hours, Sacramento Sleep Train Arena will open as a coronavirus field hospital. These 400 beds are now ready to accept patients. Tonight, ABC 10's Giacomo Luca is at the arena with a look at what it will all mean for people living nearby.
Meant to help with a potential surge in coronavirus patients if California hospitals get overwhelmed.
It's maybe about a dozen white tents.
this to be like this is just unreal. It's scary. It's terrifying. I'm scared, you know.
We see a hospital with tents. The hospitals are packed, so people are volunteering to make hospitals in tents so people will have room to still survive.
Setting up for a potential coronavirus surge that's happening right now. Members of Connecticut's National Guard are turning a college field house into a field hospital. Channel 3 New Haven Bureau Chief Matt McFarland is live with our mobile newsroom on the Southern Connecticut State University campus. Matt?
Well, Kara, less than 24 hours ago, this was an empty gymnasium, basically a field house that had nobody in it. Now you can take a look for yourself and see this is a mobile hospital here at Southern Connecticut State University. Now,
so the previous administration rolled out all these field hospitals. And the question is, well, this level is here. And we're well above that right now. So should this new administration similarly roll out the field hospitals or roll out more field hospitals because more people were dying? I don't know the answer, but certainly somebody should be looking at this. All right, back to the map. You can move the map around. You can zoom in, and you don't have to be a developer to be able to find Shanghai. And there's this tiny little dot here. Tiny little yellow dot. And if you click on Shanghai, you'll find out that there's only 7 people dead. Now, the system is being managed by Johns Hopkins. Right up here on the top, it says Johns Hopkins University. Right, so this is coming from the System Science and Engineering Center at Johns Hopkins. And this is the Michael Bloomberg School of Health at Johns Hopkins. Right down here, it says Bloomberg Philanthropies. Right, so they're helping to pay for this. And here's all the information down here in the bottom. And there's links to GitHub and all kinds of good stuff. And you can visit the Johns Hopkins Coronavirus Resource Center, where the experts help to advance our understanding of the virus. So maybe Jason and I will call in there in a week or two and see what they have to say. But what you can do here on the map is now you can go to different cities. This is what the Chinese call the island of Taipei. Used to be called Formosa, and the people who live there call it Taiwan. And there was a big dust-up with Bruce Alward from The Who over a conversation with a reporter from Hong Kong. Now, Hong Kong's here. This is Hong Kong, and this is Taiwan. They're pretty close to one another. And a reporter in Hong Kong was asking Bruce Alward about how they're doing in Taiwan. And he didn't want to talk about that.
Would the WHO consider Taiwan's membership? Hello?
I'm sorry, I can't hear you. I couldn't hear your question.
Okay, yeah. Let me repeat the question.
No, that's okay. Let's move to another one then.
Right, because I'm actually curious on talking about Taiwan as well, on Taiwan's case.
We decided to give Dr. Alward another call to follow up.
And I just want to see if you can comment a bit on how Taiwan has done so far in terms of containing the virus.
Well, we've already talked about China, and when you look across all the different areas of China, they've actually all done quite a good job. So with that, I'd like to thank you very much for inviting us to participate, and good luck as you go forward with the battle in Hong Kong.
Well, today, as I'm recording this, early February 2021, fully a year into this outbreak, according to Johns Hopkins, Hong Kong has 186 people dead and has only had a grand total of 10,600 cases. 9,800 people have recovered, and currently they've got 594 active cases, people who are actively infected with the infection in Hong Kong. Now, if we go to Taiwan, Taiwan has 24.5 million people, which is more than New York, right? So this is more than New York City. So 24.5 million people live on this island, and there are 9 people dead. 924 cases. Of the 924, 843 have recovered, and they currently are treating 72 active cases. So that's Taiwan. So with 9 people dead in Taiwan, on an island with 24.5 million people, and then you click on Hong Kong, 186 people dead in Hong Kong. I'm not sure if you guys have been to Hong Kong and if you've seen Hong Kong. If you haven't, let me run a little clip for you and show you the Hong Kong that I know. Let me show you what Hong Kong is like, because it puts this in perspective. The fact that there's 186 people dead and 10,000 cases compared to, for example, New York. So New York has 44,466 people dead. Just terrible statistics. And if I click here on New York, 1.458 million cases and 44,466 deaths. And according to this, there's 1.28 million active cases now, and only 131,000 people have recovered. So that sounds like bad data. That wouldn't make sense. But the fact that 44,000 have died, I mean, that seems like, and 1.5 million cases compared to what we just saw in Hong Kong and Shanghai. Let me go back to Hong Kong. So here's Hong Kong. 186 people died compared to 44,000, and 10,600 cases compared to 1.5 million. So let me show you what Hong Kong looks like. Come on. So that was Hong Kong. Now, Shanghai is the largest city in China. Shanghai has a population of about 24.5 million people. It's the largest city, and it has the largest gross domestic product, the largest GDP in China. So let's take a look at how they're doing with the virus. This is as of February 6, 2021. According to Johns Hopkins University, the Michael Bloomberg School of Health, Shanghai, China, their largest city, has 1,700 cases and 7 people dead. Now, this is according to Johns Hopkins, so they're reporting this. If you have other evidence that says this is not the fact, that we would love to see it, but otherwise, anybody who claims that there aren't 7 people dead is a conspiracy theorist. So if you think this is not accurate, you better have better data. Because according to the WHO and according to the Michael Bloomberg School of Health at Johns Hopkins University, there's 7 people dead in Shanghai.
Now there was a time when you loved so I couldn't do wrong, but now you need.
And similarly, we go to Beijing, right? Just make sure that these aren't anomalies. Let's go to Beijing, right? Beijing is the second largest city from a GDP perspective, and there's 9 people dead and 1,000 cases. Come on. so that's not a big number. So again, there's not 10 people dead in Beijing as of February 2021. There's not 10 people dead in Shanghai as of February 2021. And we go down to Hong Kong, and there's 186 dead and 10,000 cases. But the thing is, Taiwan hates China. They're almost going to war with one another. And they only have 9 people dead and less than 1,000 cases. So are they lying also? And then we come over here to Korea. Korea only has 1,400 people dead, less than 1,500, and 80,000 cases. For me to find a state in the United States that has that few people dead and that number of cases, I have to come over here on the map and scroll. 1464. Less than Idaho, less than South Dakota, less than Utah. So it's more than Delaware. They have fewer people dead than Utah, Idaho, South Dakota, Puerto Rico, Nebraska, Oregon, West Virginia. And again, Korea is pretty densely populated. When you get to the major cities in Korea, they're fairly densely populated. So 1,500 people dead, less than that in the entire country. So is Korea lying? And then we get over here to Japan. All right, is Japan lying? So how many people were dead in Japan compared to China? And Japan has a population of 120 million people. So Japan has 400,000 cases and 6,372 have died in Japan. But right now, if we look in the lower right-hand corner, more people are dying now than ever before in Japan. That's not good. They're up to 116 per day. All right, I want to take you guys now to another system. We're going to go over to the CDC. And the system that I use at the CDC to get the data for coronavirus is at this website. And I'll put the link up here, cdc.gov. So that's the website that I'm using. And what they publish here are the weekly updates by select demographic and geographic characteristics. And these are the provisional death counts for coronavirus disease, 2019, so COVID-19. And what we're looking at in this case, it was updated February the 3rd, 2021. And as we scroll down, this is the data. And so these are deaths involving coronavirus disease, pneumonia, and influenza. And it's kind of interesting. Pneumonia, we understand, goes with COVID, but why would you put a different virus in here? I mean, why wouldn't you put norovirus or hantavirus or rotavirus or why would you put a different virus in here? I mean, why are we tracking measles alongside with this also? I mean, this makes no sense to me. Why would you add this to this? We're tracking coronavirus, right? So this doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But let's take the data that they're giving us here and bring it into the charting software. Now, I don't use Microsoft Excel. I use the free software that comes with the Mac. I guess it's called Numbers or something. And it's good enough. So all I do is highlight this. That's all I'm doing. And that's it. And then I right-click and choose Copy. And I'm now going to open up my spreadsheet program, which is the cheap numbers thing. And I'm going to paste what I just copied into here. Now, it comes in kind of formatted crazy, so what I'm going to do now is just kind of clean it up. I'm going to take that heading and put it up here. And so this way I'm using their definitions. Right, and often what I'll do is I'll take this updated text that says when it was updated, and instead of putting table 1, I'll put that here. So now we know when we got this data. All right, so the heading is theirs, right? So this just came from their system. Now this stuff here is a couple rows too short, so I'm going to get rid of these rows. I'm going to make this a header row now. Convert to header row. And I don't need sex right now. I'm not going to worry about that at the moment, so I'm going to get rid of that column. I don't really need it. Okay. And there's an extra row in here for some reason that's not needed, so we're going to get rid of that. All right. And we have saved it. All right. And this is straight from the CDC. So what you see here and what you see here is the same thing. Right? So I just took the data from here, from the screen. It was updated February 3rd. I copied it by selecting it. Right? And then after doing that, it's now in the spreadsheet. Okay? Same data. And we make it nice and neat. Okay? So copying and pasting the data into the spreadsheet, and now using the CDC's data that was updated February 3rd, I'm going to make some charts. All right, so February 3rd, 2021, and I'm going to chart this data for you in real time and show you how I've been doing this. Okay, so I'm going to click on this little chart thing, and let's start with pie charts. And I'm going to add chart data to the pie chart. And let's start with 5 to 14. And we're going to chart all deaths involving COVID-19 against deaths from all causes. Just like that. And now if I hit the Format tab, I can add the title to the chart. And I'll do that in a second. And I can make the chart a little bit deeper. And if I click on the little wedge here, I can move the wedge out from the chart a bit. And put the bevels in here so you see them. And then instead of showing it in percentages, I prefer to show it as the actual number. And then I can move the label on the chart a little bit, and I can change the size, make it a little easier to see. And pop that up there. Now the title is too close, so I'm going to drag the whole chart down here. I can move the legend. And now for the title of the chart, I go to the title of the table. And I just copy the table title into the chart so that I'm not making up any new information. And typically what I'm going to do is delete information because, for example, we're not doing this by sex, right? So, or gender, however you guys want to refer to it. To me, it's scientifically they call it sex chromosomes. So I'm just interested in X, Y, and XX, but not in this case. So here I'm going to remove the word by sex, right? And just leave it as age group because that's all we're really looking at here. I'm just trying to format it so that when people look at it, they understand what they're reading. So deaths involving coronavirus disease, 2019, COVID-19, pneumonia, and influenza reported to the NCHS by age group. Okay, and I'll save that right now. And again, what we're looking at here, this data and this chart that we're working on, the data is the same as this. We're still, I got the CDC's website up right behind the spreadsheet. So it's this data. So this is 421,378. Everybody sees that number, 421,378. Okay, I'm going to go over here. 421,378. Okay. Now we're looking right now at this chart, which is 5 to 14 years old, all deaths involving COVID, 67. Deaths from all causes, 5,623. That's what we're looking at in this chart. And so these are all children from a certain age group to a certain age group, right? So what age group? 5 to 14. Now I need to change the legend down here. So this is all deaths involving COVID-19, 5 to 14 years old. And then this is the same 5 to 14 years old, but deaths from all causes. Okay, so now we have a legend, and the legend shows us that the green area, deaths from all causes for 5 to 14 years old, versus COVID deaths for 5 to 14 years old. And that's how I make the charts. I can make the, again, work with the fonts and things like that. I can move the labels around, and I can rotate the charts and kind of orient them to give people a sense of where this thing fits. And usually I just try and make it so that people can read the numbers. And so that's it. So that's chart number 1. I'll take a snapshot of that now. And this is how I do it, right? So let's make another one. This is 5 to 14 years old. Now, the easy thing for me now is I copy it. So if I copy and paste the chart, I've got the same format, the same everything, and I just go edit the data. So now, if I edit the data, I go up to the table, and this was 5 to 14 years old. So if we want to look at 15 to 24, so this would be sort of high school age into college and grad school, and what's happening there. I just drag that down there. Now we're going to be charting that age group, but I have to change the legend. So change it to 15 to 24 years old. Everything else is the same. And I come over here and we tell it that we're done with the data. And I just have to change this to 15 to 24. We only have modified one element. Everything else is the same. So we're comparing two different age groups, 5 to 14-year-olds and 15 to 24-year-olds. And although it's subtle, you do see that in 15 to 24-year-olds, the COVID deaths is a slightly larger slice of the pie than it is in 5 to 14-year-olds. So this is high school, college, and graduate school. But what you also see is that the overall number is significantly higher. So we're talking about over 36,000 young people in the United States dying from all causes here versus 5,600 in this age group. So this is a much larger universe of potential folks. And again, many, many, many more young people are dying here at 36,000. Let's do 65 and older. And this will be equal to 65, 75, 85. So this area here, which is 65 to 74, 75 to 84, 85 and older, I'm going to take that span and say we're going to call that 65 and older. And that's how many people that is, okay? And then over here, I'm going to put everybody else. And that will be everybody up to 65. Okay, and you see how I do that. I select all the other groups, and I leave out the 3 that we just had in the other group. Okay, so I've got 65 and older and everybody else, and now I want to chart that. Okay, so I'm going to tell the system, let's do another chart. Now, if I wanted to match these charts, I could, but I've changed so many different things, it wouldn't be part of the same scorecard or dashboard. So I might as well just create a new chart. So I'll click on that. Make a new chart, tell it to add the data, come up here and say 1, 2, and tell it that I need it to plot the rows as series. And there we go. So I've now told the system that's what I want to chart, and let's see what it came up with. So this is the default chart, and now I'll try and make it somewhat more interesting to look at and easier to understand. By changing the percentages to numbers. And then I have to make sure we have a title on here so people know what they're looking at. And in this case, I probably will copy these titles because I formatted these. And then I will edit it after the fact. as such. So this is by age group, so it's actually okay. I don't have to make any changes. So what we're looking at here is 65 and older and everybody else. If I want to bring these numbers in closer to the center, I can. If I want to make them a little bit bigger so that you can read them. If I want to make them like so, I can change the color of the print. And there we have it. If I want to move this wedge out just a little bit, we can do that. And then if I want to rotate this whole thing, we can do that. All right. And then after that, I'll save and take a snapshot. So this data, the data that's here, is coming from this table. And yes, I'm summing it, but I'm just adding up their information, right? I'm not changing this data. If we want to look at all deaths involving COVID by age, can we chart that? Yes, we can. So let's do a bar chart. And on the bar chart, as I go to add the data, I'm going to chart by age deaths from COVID. And let's see what that gives us. So now what we're looking at is all deaths from COVID by age group. And again, the data is coming from here, and this data that we're charting here just came from this website from the CDC. Okay, so everything that we're charting is coming right from the copy and paste that we just did here. All right, so on this chart, we're looking at the deaths by age group, and this is in the United States. So these are all deaths involving COVID-19, and then down here, we have the age groups. All right, so this is showing us sort of the distribution of the COVID deaths in the United States and where the numbers are. And so what we see is at 65 to 74, 75 to 84, 85 and older, over 70,000 people have died in these categories. And in the last two, 75 and older, over 100,000 have died in these two categories. 55 to 64 years old, we're in this 35 to 70, so somewhere in there. But when we get down to the children, 5 to 14 and 15 to 24, just again, we're just simply trying to put this in perspective, and that's what this chart does. So the idea here is simply to compare which age groups are dying more than other age groups. And when we look at the 5 to 14 and 15 to 24-year-olds, even the 25 to 34-year-olds, compared to 65 and older, it's just not as big a number. Okay, so that's how we do that. All of this is coming from the CDC's National Center for Health Statistics and this particular web page. Right, and I'm using the data, and what I've been doing is I simply copy and paste the data from the screen. So I take it right from here. I do not bother with the download because the download format and the data that's shown here is not necessarily the same. The other interesting aspect of the data is that they give us the population for each one of these age groups. And that's really useful because what we see is that the population of 1 to 4-year-olds and under 1-year-old, that the population here is much, much smaller than the population in the middle. So the largest population group is the group of 25 to 34-year-olds. And in the United States, there's about 46 million, just shy of 46 million. That's the largest population group. And as we get up to 75 to 84-year-olds, there's only 16 million, just shy of 16 million in the United States. And when we get to over 85 years old, of the 6.6 million, the ratio is almost 2 to 1, women over men. And we can see that as we scroll down here. Men over 85, there's only 2.3 million in the country, in the United States. Women over 85, there's 4.2 million, significantly more, almost twice as many. And so more women are dying in this age category, but the population's almost twice as much. 75 to 84, there's about 9 million women in the United States that are 75 to 84 years old versus 7 million men. So 9 million women and 7 million men in the United States in those age groups. So you can make your own tables and copy and paste this into your spreadsheet, and that's all I've been doing. This is where I get the lion's share of my data. There's other information here as well by age groups and comorbidities, and they get into things like hypertension and how many people had hypertension and died of COVID, how many people had a cardiac arrest and had COVID, how many people had sepsis. And sepsis, if I understand this correctly, is how they're describing the condition of the lung tissue after COVID has kind of destroyed the lungs. And that this is what I heard a number of doctors saying, is that COVID has been ravaging the lung tissue. And so I believe that that may be why sepsis is showing up as one of the comorbidities on so many. 62,000 people had diabetes. So this is probably the number 2. Well, I guess no, hypertension. Hypertension is 79,000, diabetes 62,000. So the order is going to be of comorbidities just based on the data that I see in front of me. It appears that influenza is obviously number 1 because it's more than 50%, and then hypertension, and then diabetes. So those are the 3 most deadly comorbidities that you could have with COVID, just statistically speaking, not medically speaking, statistically speaking, big difference. Okay, so numerically speaking, not medically, those are the ones that jump off the page at us. And then there's everything else here, poisonings and all this other stuff. So this is where we're getting the data from the CDC. Show you another site from the CDC. This is the pneumonia and influenza mortality surveillance system. So this is the system of record, the Center for Health Statistics, and this is for pneumonia and influenza. And there's a specific death code. It's called an ICD-10, multiple cause of death code, for PNI, pneumonia and influenza. Here they refer to it as PNI. So this system has been in place for a number of years. It's been tracking pneumonia and influenza deaths. This is what it does, and it gets it from coroners. And so what we get to see here is sort of a running tally of how the United States is doing with its flu season. And what we see here on the left side is that it's been at or above threshold for the entire 2020-2021 season. You can go back and look at previous seasons, but the 2020-2021 season, every single week is above threshold. Now, this is pneumonia and influenza. This has nothing to do with COVID. We just came from the COVID system. The COVID system's over here. This is COVID. Okay, COVID. Right? This other system is pneumonia and influenza mortality. Different. Flu view. Right? Flu view has nothing to do with COVID. There's no COVID here. It doesn't say COVID. It doesn't say COVID. No COVID. Influenza, pneumonia, total deaths. That's it. So we go to see how's the United States doing at the moment, and it doesn't look good. In fact, it looks worse than at any time last year, and that can't be good. So how do I chart this data? How do I get this into the system? Up here, you have a choice: national, state, or region. I never use the region. Never. It appears that right now, District of Columbia is selected on the left. And you see the District of Columbia had a really bad peak in 2019-2020 in influenza, but you weren't told that by the news media. And now in 2020-2021, it appears it's going up, but then coming down. I don't know. If we look in New York City, now these are deaths. This is different from most leading indicator systems. Leading indicator systems show you people going to the doctor, who's reporting they don't feel well and getting tested. This is reporting people have already died. So these people are dead already. Right? These people may have found out that they were sick after the fact. Well, as of week 3 of the season, which is the 4th week into January or something like that, in New York City, 16.7% of the deaths are P&I. That's big, 16.7%. Now, we're going to look at the actual numbers in a second. If we go to New York State, what do we see? 18.8% in week 1 in New York State. If we go to California, what do we see? Whoa, California, much worse than last year, 29.5%. So when I see this type of thing with the data, see, look at last year California and look at now California. So now I have to look at this. So I'm going to drill in by hitting this green download button here. We have California selected. The only problem is I don't want 5 years of data. I don't want all this stuff. I don't need it. Okay. I really just kind of want to look at from the beginning of this season to now and see what's going on here. This doesn't look good. Worse than last year, obviously. So I'm going to deselect those years and just leave 2020, 2021. It won't let me uncheck that. That's what that means, is you have to have something picked. And now I click OK. So now we're looking just at the 2020, 2021 season in California. This is what we're looking at. And according to the system, it says there's 425 deaths. Let's see if the data supports that when we download it. So I'm going to hit download. And it says, do you want the data as displayed? Yeah, that's exactly what I want. That's why I just set it up that way. So I hit download data. I can save the file or I can open it. I'm going to tell it to open the file with my spreadsheet thing. And here we go. The data was just imported. So this is straight from the CDC. Now, the only thing is they don't add P and I. They just give you a column of P and a column of I, and they don't add the two together, and that's what P and I is. They give you the percentage, but they don't add it up. They tell you the total deaths from all causes, but I don't need total deaths from all causes right now, so I'm going to change this to P and I total deaths instead of deaths from all causes, because I don't really need deaths from all causes. And then I'm just going to make it equal to influenza plus pneumonia. That's what P&I is. P&I is influenza and pneumonia deaths. And we copy that formula down, and then I'm going to add a row just because I'm curious what the total is. $19,782 people in California have already died from pneumonia and influenza, according to the CDC, right? Where did I just get this data? I just got this data from here. We just downloaded this together, right? So according to this data from the CDC, right? CDC, FluView Interactive, National Center of Health Statistics, Mortality. State is California. According to them, what do we have? 19,782 people dead since week 40. Week 40 was October 1st, 2020. So October going into the end of December. This was the last week of December. First week of January was an extra week. I guess it was a leap year. And then this is January. And there's only 95% reporting in for week 3. And week 4, they've only got 40% of the reporting in. So week 4, you can't really count. But week 3, you can. So why don't we chart this? This is California. And let's see what the current season flu outbreak looks like in California right now. So this started in October, and I'm only going to go to where we have 95% reporting. All right, so the good news is it looks like it's coming off its peak, right? It looks like the peak has come and gone, and it's starting to trail, and that's with 95% reporting here. So it looks like they peaked back on week 53. So this is like New Year's week was the worst. And now it's coming down in California. And again, this is P&I deaths. This is influenza and pneumonia deaths. And this shouldn't say state down here, so I change that. I have to change that axis. And I do that by telling it that these labels are wrong and that they should be this instead. And there you go. So that's your week number. This is the influenza season week number. And that's how many people died, P&I, total deaths for the week. And this puts this in perspective. And if we look at how many people, this is just California. Right, so we're looking at just California. There's 20,000 people almost that have died in California so far this season. Let's now go back to the map and go to the national level and see where does the United States, I mean, this is bad. This is worse than last year, and last year was the worst in, you see here, last year was much worse than this, and Dr. Fauci told us that was 80,000. This was the second hump in the United States, and now this influenza season is much, much worse than ever. So let's download this data and chart that and see what we have. So this is the 2021 season, and I make sure national is selected now. And with 2021, I hit download. Download the data as it's displayed. Yeah, that's right. And what should we do with it? Let's open it up. There we go. We've got a new spreadsheet. All right, so we're using the CDC's data, and we're going to tally it up. So this is for the country. Now, again, they do the same thing here. Total deaths is total deaths from all causes. We want total P&I deaths. We don't need deaths from all causes right now. And we're just simply going to add influenza to pneumonia, and that gives you P&I. Copy that. Give this a little format help. All right, now we're going to add this up. There's 154,000 people that have died from P&I so far in the United States in the 2020-2021 season, according to the CDC's data, according to the system, this FluView mortality system that we just downloaded this data from. So this is their count. This is their their database. This is their, I mean, I don't know how to be more clear that this is coming directly from the CDC. Right? I mean, we just downloaded this. We just hit this download button. And after doing that, we're in the spreadsheet, and here's the number. This is the data. There's total P&I deaths, 154,000. Let's chart it. Let's see what it looks like. As I add the data for the deaths, I begin in week 40. That's first week of October 2020. And as I add them, you'll see. All right. So if I stop at the last week where we have 100% reporting, which is week 2, it appears that it did peak earlier than that, which is good. Now, the next week, we don't have full reporting in. And then this next week, it's not even close to full, so I'm reluctant to show it to you. Yeah. But it does appear we're coming off of the peak. Now, will there be a second node again? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. Let me format the chart so it makes some sense here. These labels are wrong, and that should be week number. So what you're looking at here is how many people died each week in the United States from P&I in the 2021 season. So this is 2020, 2021. And that's what we have. So this is coming in straight from the CDC. This is the data from this website, from the CDC. And we just downloaded it and charted it. And according to them, there's 154,000 people that have died. How many weeks had over 10,500? Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks. have had over 10,500 people die from PNI. There's pneumonia and influenza deaths, not coronavirus. Different. We just looked at coronavirus before. So this was October, first week, coming into December, New Year's, and it appears it's trailing down now. But this is how I do it, and this is where the data comes from. And I wanted you to see that. So FluView Interactive is one of the websites that shows information, but there's a lot of confusing stuff here that's not necessarily the original source. And one of the things that is interesting, though, is if you go to pediatric mortality and you look at, well, how many kids have died so far this season from influenza? And if you notice in their overall picture here, they don't show you the current season. They show you previous seasons, but not the prior season. When you click on View the Application, it'll take you to it. And what you'll see here, this is pediatric mortality surveillance. This is the official CDC disease, this is their site. And this is for children younger than 18 years of age. Okay, laboratory confirmed influenza-associated deaths in children younger than 18 years of age. All right, so that's what we're looking at. And what you're going to see is that in 2017-18, you had 188. In 2018-19, you had 144. 2019-20, you had 195. And in 2020-2021, you have 1. So this season, there's only 1 death that's been attributed to influenza amongst children compared to at this time. So right now we're in week 4, week 5. So week 4, week 5, last season, influenza deaths amongst children were already peaking, right, at their high. If we go to week 4, week 5 over here in this 2018-19 season, also, the deaths were already up above a certain threshold, and we're on a weekly basis. Same thing if we go to 2017-18 and we look at week number 4, week number 5. What we see is that death counts were up over 10 per week of kids, and yet in the 2020-2021 season, there's only 1. And we have to juxtapose this single pediatric death against the prior seasons, right? So if in the last 3 seasons there was 188, 144, 195, and this season there's 1, Malcolm Gladwell would call that an outlier. Okay? Now we have to look at that outlier against what we just charted a second ago, meaning we know from this system that there's 154,000 PNI deaths in the United States. We just downloaded this. This is 2021. This is this season, right? This is right as we speak, 2020, 2021, not last year. And when we charted that, it showed us 154,000 people have already died. Here's the chart. And only 1 of those was a kid? Only 1 of the 154,339 people that have died of PNI since October. What we're hearing from the CDC is only 1 of those was a child? How is that possible? I don't know. I'm John Cullen. Thanks for joining.